Ladies and gentlemen, let's get the show on the road. I called to order the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board of Directors regular meeting Friday, August 9th, 2 o'clock. We do have a quorum. We'll be going to closed session here very shortly. The topics will be conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, government code 54956.9 alpha. 5 cases, Keep Fort Ord Wild versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, case numbers M114961, M116438, M119217, and Bogan versus Hulamard, case number M122980, and City of Marina versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, case number M118566, and a conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, government code 54956.9, Bravo 1 case. Before we go into closed session, any member of the public wishing to address the board on any of the items we'll be discussing in closed session? Saying none, we will be adjourning now and reconvening next door as is our custom in open session. We'll be back as soon as we possibly can. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm reconvening the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board of Directors regular meeting. We'll start off with the announcement of action taken in closed session. Our attorney, John Giffen.
Yes, thank you, Board Chair. The council or the board heard from council in closed session on each of the 5 items that were listed on existing litigation and 1 item in anticipated litigation, and there is nothing to report out.
Thank you, John. I would ask Supervisor Lou Calcagno if he'd please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Justice
Next, we have announcements, acknowledgements, and correspondence. Colonel Fellinger has an announcement for us.
Hey, for the board members, on the 16th of August, we are going to host the U.S. Army Soldier Show at Price Fitness Center, and you are all welcome to attend that. It is a show that is exclusively U.S. Army soldiers for U.S. service members, actually, on Presidio. So it is going to be a great time, about an hour and a half. Please, if you've got the time on the 16th, show up. Starts at 1900 up at Price. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir. Michael?
One note to make about the 2013 FORA annual report. Members of the board each have received a copy of the annual report that reflects the activities of the previous fiscal year, in this case from July 1, 2012 to June 30, 2013. It's also available for all on the web. And Lena Spillman said that she's already seen that several have been downloaded and printed, so I understand the public is readily knowledgeable about the new annual report. We intend to provide a more concise version of the annual report. Many of you will note that it is 40 pages or so this time, and you're used to something quite a bit shorter this year. But last year, during the reassessment process, representatives from the Sierra Club and from the community asked that we provide a more thorough annual report. And if you fall asleep while you're reading it, it'll honor us.
Great for insomnia. A little bit of housekeeping. Lena, if you could please perform roll call, please.
City of Carmel by the Sea, Councilmember Beach. City of Delray Oaks, Mayor Edelin.
Here.
City of Marina, Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell. Here. City of Marina, Councilmember Morton. Here. City of Monterey, Councilmember Selfridge. Here. Monterey County Supervisor Potter. Monterey County Supervisor Salinas. Monterey County Supervisor Parker. Monterey County Supervisor Calcagno. City of Pacific Grove, Mayor Camp. Here. City of Salinas, Mayor Gunter. Here. City of Sand City, Mayor Pendergrass. Here. City of Seaside, Mayor Rubio. Here. City of Seaside, Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby. Here. 20th Congressional District, Alec Arago. 17th State Senate District, Nicole Charles. 29th State Assembly District, Erica Parker. University of California, Graham Bice. California State University, Eduardo Ochoa. Monterey Peninsula College, Walter Tribley. Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, Dan Albert Jr. Monterey Salinas Transit, Hunter Harvath. Transportation Agency of Monterey County, Debbie Hale. Here. United States Army, Colonel Fellinger. Here. Fort Ord BRAC Office, Bill Collins. Marina Coast Water District, Director Moore.
Here.
Chair Edelin, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Lena. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Any member of the board wish to pull any item from the consent agenda for question or discussion? Seeing none, going out to the public, any member of the public wish to pull any of the consent agenda items? Seeing none, back to the board. Entertain a motion, please. Okay, Mayor Rubio made the motion. Second is who? Bill Camp. All in favor? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have the new business consistency determination, the promontory at California State University, Monterey Bay. Michael?
Yes, Chair Edelin, the City of Marina has submitted a request for the Fort Ord Reuse Authority to review their determination of consistency of the promontory project, and Christy Diorio from the city will provide a presentation that gives an outline of their consistency determination for your consideration.
Yes, my name is Christine Diorio. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Marina. And within your packets, you received for tonight's meeting as the request for a consistency determination with regards to the promontory. And within your packet, you received a specific plan referred to the promontory at California State Monterey Bay. The specific plan provides the design guidelines and the development standards for a 176-unit student housing facility. Again, this is a private developer in concert with CSUMB students. This is also a DDA, which the development and disposition agreement for the land sale of this property. The property is located on 8th Street. It is a site with blight. It has buildings that are in dire need of demolition. This offers an opportunity to place, as I said, 176 units. That's 580, well, around 580 beds for the CSUMB campus. You'll see within the package the design. It's been through the city's design review board. It's 3 buildings. The highest point is around 40 feet. And it has the circulation system with access on 8th Street and emergency access on one of the side roads that it faces. So the consistency packet you received follows the requirements under Chapter 8 that are also within your packet. I can answer any questions with regards to that. Just as another comment, you received comments both from Jane Haynes and also with the Sierra Club. And just to address those specific concerns, I'd like to just cover a couple items and go over those with you in regards to the open space or trail corridor that they speak to and the concerns that they've raised with that. And I'd like to express that we have found that to be consistent and with the base reuse plan. And also, as you noted, the FORA staff has also found that our consistency finding is in conformance with the base reuse plan. So if I can just go over those real quickly with those comments. Again, the City of Marina's general plan implements the Fort Ord base reuse plan, and policy 4.33 of the City of Marina general plan offers greater detail regarding the implementation of the future 8th Street improvements, which are inclusive of pedestrian and bicycle connections to the Coastal Trail, the Dunes Shopping Center, as well out to the BLM lands, and now is the National Monument. The ultimate cross-section for 8th Street shows that there is a 8-foot landscape right-of-way for pedestrians and cyclists, and there's a total 40 feet of right-of-way dedicated to the regional trail and open space network. And so referring to our negative deck, there's a figure 16 which shows the multiple pedestrian and bicycle connections. And most importantly, in addressing the Sierra Club, is the base reuse plan itself identifies hiker and biker trails as major and minor. And you'll see in figure 4.3-1 of the open space and recreation element, not just the conceptual framework plan, which people always refer to somewhat as the spleen, and an open space network, but the actual specifics that are to be carried out in the City of Marina, similar to Seaside and the county and other agencies also within former Fort Ord, that then achieve the regional trail. So within that document is the Marina open space recreational element. And on that element, and just in reference to that, is an orange dashed line along 8th Street, again, which this borders, which is shown on the legend to indicate a major regional hiker-biker trail. And as quoted out of the base reuse plan, major trails in most cases are located within the rights-of-way plan for major transportation arterials, and standards for major trails specify a minimum trail pavement width of 12 feet consisting of asphalt or concrete. And to further, just to go over this real quickly, is the reference for the 8th Street is referred to in the base reuse plan as the Inner Garrison Trail. And that Inner Garrison Trail has a major trail, as a major trail, is a more regional function. And it does speak within, as a major trail, again, reiterating what I previously read is this 12-foot hiking and biking trail, which is a part of this project. I just wanted to refer to those sections of the base reuse plan in addressing our consistency finding for this evening. So I can answer any questions if you have any questions specific to the project.
Thank you, ma'am. Good briefing. Any members of the board have any questions? Yes, Ralph?
I'm going to refer to this letter about the AMCAL project prevailing wages that's on my dais.
Yes.
And it seems it's from Goldfarb and Lippman attorneys. And it seems that the AMCAL project is trying to institute residential rates on this project. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, this matter has been handled by the courts once, and its decision was appealed twice, and it's upheld. The section, and I'm very glad that Goldfarb and Lippman cited the section because it's the main body of the section in the master resolution that provides that not less than general prevailing wage rates will be paid to all workers on Fort Ord. Now, a residential rate is less than the general rate. Now, it says, as determined by the director of the department. The general prevailing rate is determined by the director of the department. And that is done yearly. Okay. So I don't see how, by going through all these other machinations here, you get to pay less than the general prevailing rate.
If I could make a clarification, when I said yes, that's not a determination that's made. They're making the prevailing, they will be paying prevailing wages. This is an opinion paper by our attorney which speaks to either the general rate or the residential rate. And it's just to point out that if a residential wage rate determination request is made, it's not, that has to be made at this point. This is an interpretation, I mean, a legal opinion. Most likely only two trades would differ from the other prevailing wages established for Monterey County. So it's just trying to set out that what determination I know.
Right. I know
Mr.
what they're trying to set out. What they're trying to set out is paying less than the general prevailing rate. But the master resolution says not less than the general prevailing rate. So they shouldn't even be looking at a determination whether they can pay a residential rate, because it would not apply, because then it would violate the master resolution. That's the point I'm trying to make. Whether or not they go around and try to find a different rate, that's fine, but they will be held to the master resolution. And since they're bidding on Tuesday, I think that point needs to be made very emphatically, because I'm sure that there's a lawyer somewhere waiting for that lawsuit to start again. In fact, if there isn't, I'll find one.
Any
Thank
other
you.
any other questions by board members? Yes, Ian.
I guess the question for me to Marina is, where does Marina stand on entertaining paying less than the prevailing rate for this type of project, this first generation project? That's what the board needs to know, is where you guys stand on allowing anything other than the right pay scale to go forward.
Well, under the consistency finding, the city council has adopted a resolution ensuring that prevailing wages will be paid.
Chair, if I might, the city manager, the city marina, the developer, and the council, I think, have all agreed that prevailing wage, according to the master resolution, would be paid. There are some specific circumstances and options in the master resolution. If those are met, the four exceptions, then it may be a different wage, but only if it meets those requirements in the master resolution.
Other questions by board members? Saying none, out to the public. Any member of the public wishing to address the board on this issue?
My name is Eric Peterson, and I didn't have any interest in speaking, but something caught my ear, and this is a request for clarification. There was a reference to a 12-foot wide facility for non-motorized people, and California Highway Design Manual says the minimum paved width for a two-way bike path shall be 8 feet, 10 foot preferred, plus 2-foot shoulders on either side. Plus, the page in front of this says if there's anticipated to be a lot of pedestrian use, there should be a separate pedestrian facility. Without getting in, I'm not familiar with the details here, and that's why I'm asking this. We've got a lot of completed projects in our area that are done very different than Caltrans requirements already. We need another one, and I'm just hoping I'm wrong on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Margaret Davis. This CEQA analysis is incomplete. It completely ignores the trail open space corridor identified in map 3.6-1 of the Fort Ord reuse plan. This corridor is not a 12-foot bike lane. It's described in section 3.6.2 as not only the most important connection in the Fort Ord Trail Network, which is a system of corridors for movement of wildlife and plant species between the larger reserve areas, and as a matrix into which are embedded the various communities and residential neighborhoods of former Fort Ord, a far cry from a paved or even a decomposed granite trail. I want to quote from the base reuse plan in detail. Perhaps the most important open space connection is that which joins the large interior tracts of land with Fort Ord Dune State Beach through the CSUMB campus and along Inner Garrison Road, 8th Street. This connection responds largely to human purposes and needs. This open space connection is an integral part of the overall strategy for the reuse of Fort Ord and an important part of the marketing plan for redevelopment. The perception of an overall high quality of life in both the work and living environment will be a key to attracting new residents, businesses, and students. The presence of a beautiful setting and easy access to plentiful recreation are essential to the development of this perception. And I want to quote, on the local level, this is pertinent of a global vision and a state and national value that was expressed by a hero of mine. Quote, "There is an absolute necessity of waging all-out war against the debauching of the environment. Our roads and public projects must be planned to prevent the destruction of scenic resources and to avoid needlessly upsetting the ecological balance." That is a quotation from Governor Ronald Reagan in 1970.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker.
Ron Cheshire speaking on behalf of the Monterey-Santa Cruz County's Building and Construction Trades Council. S.I. Hayakawa would love all of you at this time. Prevailing wages. It's a term that you hear a lot. There are general prevailing wage determinations, and there are residential prevailing wage determinations. The master resolution states you will pay the general wage determination amount. The project does not meet any of the exemptions in the FORA language. The project is also not consistent in regards to other ways. We don't want to have to go to court again. We do not appreciate Marina's ignorance or their continuing to try and circumvent what the working people of this community instituted over 20 years ago so they could get a piece of the pie. And we would hope that you would not support this at this time until they could be fully consistent and compliant with the FORA Master Resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Chair, Board. Thank you for putting this on your agenda. I agree with Ron Cheshire that this project needs to comply with all prevailing wage requirements. I think that that needs to be applied fairly and consistently, and whatever arrangements were made at the East Garrison's recently completed affordable housing project and are currently being applied to the South County Housing's affordable housing project along 2nd Avenue should apply to this project. And if it doesn't qualify for an exemption, it shouldn't have any exemptions. It should pay the prevailing general rate rather than the residential rates. I'm not sure if it qualifies. I'm not sure if it does qualify, if it's already applied or will apply for an exemption. I just think that whatever occurred with East Garrison's and South County Housing's affordable housing projects on Fort Ord should apply here to be fair and consistent. And I also agree completely with Margaret Davis in her advocacy for open space protection and scenic vista visual resource protections. I note that the North Quad dormitories that are recently built in Marina on campus at CSU are the same height that this promontory project is to be, and so it's consistent with what is in the neighborhood, and that this has been almost 13 years of a community process to get to this point. When our general plan began in 1999, that process, and finished in 2000, it was found to be consistent with the Fort Ord Base Reuse Plan, because indeed our general plan was written in order to be consistent with the 1997 general or Base Reuse Plan. So our city council found this project to be consistent with our general plan, and your board found our general plan to be consistent with your Base Reuse Plan. So we've had in mind consistency with the Fort Ord Base Reuse since the inception of this project, and for 2 years, AmCal and California State University, Monterey Bay, and City of Marina have been working on this project with consistency in mind. Ralph Rubio, Mayor Rubio, you mentioned, at least you were quoted in the County Weekly as saying that land use issues in the city of Seaside are sovereign to the jurisdiction. This land use issue in the city of Marina is sovereign to the city of Marina to the extent that it can be.
30 seconds.
But I do understand that you, FORA board, are entrusted to move the base reuse plan forward and consistent projects. So I appreciate your support on this issue and hope that we can move ahead with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next speaker, please.
Jane Haynes. I'd like to address today's memorandum from Mr. Hulamard to your board. On the back, he speaks about Sierra Club concern that this consistency determination not move forward while all applicable BRP policies and programs may not yet be complete. I addressed that in my letter to you that I emailed to you yesterday. I won't repeat that, but I do want to say two things about respond to two statements in here. First, he says that Sierra Club and myself have raised issues about the regional urban design guidelines. That's never mentioned in Sierra Club's letter. It's never mentioned in my letter. Second, it says that as Mayor Delgado just said, the FORA board found the Marina General Plan consistent with the Base Reuse Plan in 2001. Of course, that's true. Nobody doubts that. That doesn't mean a specific plan in 2013 is consistent with the Base Reuse Plan. So those are my two comments. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other member of the public wishing to address the board on this topic? Okay, seeing none, there were some questions raised earlier about width of paths and roads and so forth. Christy, I'm sorry, would you like to, where is she? Okay.
Within the specific plan, there is a circulation plan that shows the design of the roads. And I need to hear specifically what was asked about the road.
The 12-foot trail.
The 12-foot trail is, if you'd like to, there's a cross-section that was included in the specific plan that models the 8th Street plan within our general plan. So it's on page 1-14. How is it that it shows a 4-foot sidewalk adjacent to the project, and then there's a 10-foot Class 1 bikeway. And then on the north side of the street, there's a 4-foot walkway. So that's, it's hard to just describe all of this without seeing what the diagram is. I'm not sure how you, if I could address them specifically, or if there's additional information I need to provide. It's just a hard thing to.
Christy, could you just reiterate exactly the path that you mentioned earlier about how the trail system connects between the National Monument to the coast? There are two different ones that you mentioned. Could you reiterate?
Okay. Well, I can go ahead and just read that from the base reuse plan. That is consistent with how we have developed 8th Street. And it just, it speaks to the Inner Garrison Trail, and it's a major trail that has a minimum trail pavement width of 12 feet. And this trail surface consists of asphalt or concrete, although a wood plank surface is permitted on causeways or boardwalks. And this trail system connects Fort Ord Dunes State Beach, and again, I'm reading under the definition of the Inner Garrison Trail that's referred to on 139 of the base reuse plan. And this connects Fort Ord Dunes State Beach to the CSUMB campus, the former landfill area, the BLMs, and again, lands, through Marina's Community Park, which is the equestrian center at this time, and East Garrison by means of the 8th Street Bridge, 8th Street and Inner Garrison Road. So, it says the right-of-way reserved for Inner Garrison Road is sufficient to accommodate the hiker-biker trail on the south side of the street. That's how this was developed and what I referred to earlier. Does that explain?
That should do it. Thank you. Jonathan, Jane Hands had questions with regard to the original base reuse plan, consistency determination criteria with regard to what we're doing right now. Could you address that, please?
So I think Ms. Haynes was bringing up just the statement that the FORA board found the Marina general plan consistent in March of 2001. And so the comment, I think, was just based on conditions might be different in 2013. So as you see in Mr. Hulamard's memo for today, he also points out that the 8th Street supplies sufficient right-of-way to address bicyclists and pedestrians' uses for that particular trail. And also, the Marina General Plan has a park planning study component to it, which would address a recreation plan for the City of Marina.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, back to the board. Any other questions from board members, comments? Yes, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was a little bit curious on the wildlife corridors, how that fits with the connecting paths. And is this a dual-purpose path, or is it are there separate paths that maintain the wildlife corridors? That was not clear from the comments, and I was hoping and then I also had another question regarding prevailing wage, which is obviously a sensitive topic. Is that something that...
Let's let Christy answer your first question
okay.
first. Christy, could you answer that, please?
That's a good question. That's something that we spoke with the Sierra Club yesterday, because the wildlife corridors are really addressed under the biological studies and the habitat management plan. And so when we look at this trail system and the interpretation of this trail system, it speaks more to linkages and connectors between open space areas. And I think that it says here, as a definition of these major trails, as having a more regional function, connecting foot and non-motorized traffic to destinations outside of the former Fort Ord, or completing critical higher volume linkages within the former Fort Ord. So it seems like there might be the vision now is, I mean, maybe to consider is that there is now an addition that these corridors that are looked at in the, in the biological studies might now become a part of these trail systems rather than linking the redeveloped areas that we have for housing to the open space areas, that it's now also incorporating some of those wildlife corridors. And that's something that was discussed in our, as a part of our adopted, our bike and pedestrian master plan as well, that there's that and/or consideration, because it seems to be two different things under our general plan.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christie.
And the other part of it was the discussion on prevailing wage. We heard the assurances from Marina. Is this something where a priori assurances are what we're voting on, or is it going to ultimately be enforced based on the action of Marina anyway, in which case there has been a pledge in the consistency determination that the appropriate standards will be maintained? Do we need to go into that anymore as a factor in our vote?
I don't think so. Let me ask the executive officer here.
The rules of the master resolution will be enforced.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, very briefly, I'd just like to, because the prevailing wage is so important, and I feel that some people may be confused or upset with the content of the Goldfarb-Lippmann letter of August 8th. So if I may just very briefly, the second paragraph reads in part as follows. The FORA Master Resolution is section 3.03.090 provides that, quote, not less than the general prevailing rate of wages for work of a similar character in Monterey County as determined by the Director of the Department of Industrial Relations under Division 2, Part 7, Chapter 1 of the California Labor Code, will be paid to all workers employed in the first generation construction performed on parcels subject to the Fort Ord reuse plan, end quote. The next sentence is the important one that I think will eliminate the confusion that exists. Section 7.6 of the AmCal DDA entered into between the City of Marina and AmCal requires that AmCal comply with all these requirements and pay prevailing wages in accordance with the master resolution on the construction of the project. The City Council has voted that way. The City of Marina has taken that position, and there's nothing to justifiably make anyone believe that we're going to do anything contrary to that. We're going to do exactly what we're supposed to do, and so is the developer. So I don't really see this as an issue, but I do want to read that in to make sure that if you do have concerns, probably you need to have a concern about something else on some other matter, because you shouldn't have a concern about that.
Thank you, Frank. Michael, you had some comments about the administrative committee.
Debbie had a question.
David, let's get your question first. Sorry.
All right. This is a really critical part of the multimodal corridor that the Transportation Agency is studying and coordinating with FORA, as well as the City of Marina, the county, and the City of Salinas. And I just want to ask the City of Marina to take the time when this specific plan gets more specific, because it's pretty conceptual of our bike and pedestrian use, to come to our Bike and Pedestrian Committee and get input on the specific designs. What's important is that it says here that there's sufficient right-of-way on 8th Street set aside that won't be developed. But the actual, whether it's a bike path or a bike lane, which is what our policies would call for in a road with this projected level of traffic and width, I would hope could be determined as the project is designed. And generally that's not set in stone at the specific plan level, but I just want to get on the record for those like Mr. Peterson who may have some concerns about some of the things referred to in here. My reading of it is it's pretty broad right now, and so if you'll work with us on that in the future, I think we can get a good contiguous corridor with the Dunes development, which does have a very good cross-section set up in their actual design.
Thank you, David. Very constructive. Michael, Admin Committee.
Yes, just the board members did receive at their table, as mentioned before, a memorandum that described the outcome of the administrative committee's work this last week. The administrative committee met twice and talked at considerable length about the project and had some concerns about items related to the establishment of the sales price, which is part of our consistency determination, and making sure that the path to negotiating those was consistent with fair share obligations. There's also some questions had to do with the relationship between the unit counts and how they work. Of course, during the course of the week, we met with CSUMB and many others to work that through. There were also questions about project water allocation, and in addition to the comments you heard earlier about questions on consistency determination activities in past years. So all of those items were explored in great detail by the administrative committee, and they concluded that in their view and their planning manager, their consistent review, that they are recommending that the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board concur in the City of Marina's determination of consistency.
Thank you, Michael. Any other comments or yes, Gail.
Yes. I would just like to address the public's interest in the map 3.6-1, that open space recreation corridor. I concur that the City of Marina and every jurisdiction should and must be required to be consistent with the base reuse plan to plan within their jurisdiction how that open space corridor is going to pass through their lands to connect the State Dunes Park and the National Monument. That is critical to the base reuse plan. The City of Marina has failed to look in detail in its specific plans on where that recreation open space corridor, that is different than a 12-foot hiking trail. We all understand that now. So the City of Marina, as a city council member, I am committed, and I believe our city manager is committed, that we will be looking at our internal documents to make sure that we are addressing this open space corridor, that there is land available, even with the promontory, which is already blighted land, for this to be implemented and included. The recreation open space corridor is much, much different. It is for animals. It is for wildlife to transgress. It's for equestrians. It is something other than that 12 feet. We acknowledge that, and we need to take care of it within our city, as do all the other jurisdictions that connect those two parks in implementing the base reuse plan.
Thank you, Gail. Ian?
I was thinking about this, and I was wondering where did Marina, particularly the board members, stand on this. You know, we got it from the council, but we don't know whether it's 4155023 or whatever the case may be. So I'm glad to have our board members speak to the issue. And because I was a little concerned when I heard the mayor speak, and he was like, wasn't unsure whether it was consistent or not. But one thing that he did say is that Marina should be able to determine whether it's consistent with their general plan. And they voted on that, and they sent that up to us, and with that reassurance, I'm comfortable. And after Michael's and the FORA staff independent evaluation, then I'm comfortable that it is pretty much consistent. I think we answered the question about the general prevailing wages, but I just wanted to put an exclamation point on the sovereignty of each city to make that determination, because we just heard our board members say that they're not there yet, but they're working towards it, and that shouldn't hold us back. And so as other jurisdictions go forward, we would want the same respect and I won't say leeway, but I would say understanding that everything is not perfect. And I'll just take one more, about 30 seconds, and read something into the record. We all received a letter from the Sierra Club dated 9 August 2013, and I'm not sure where they stand. They want us to hold this thing up to look over it and make sure the plan, and particularly the design elements, are in place before we go forward. But what it says, the last paragraph says, the Fort Ord reuse plan was developed to ensure that the former Fort Ord would be developed as a regional asset, benefiting the local jurisdictions and the surrounding areas, with an equal focus on the economy, education, and environment. The Sierra Club looks to the authority to ensure that the full measure of this plan is realized. And so when I look and I say, well, 70% of Fort Ord is already reserved for the environment, you know, each educational entity, and we see the big one entering the room now, Dr. Ochoa representing CSUMB, they're sovereign with their close to 1,200 acres. We can't tell them what to do and what not to do. And we find out today that any units that are built on CSUMB land don't count against the cap, residential cap, right? So that's how sovereign they are. But what I want to focus on is the economy aspect. If they're to be given equal weight, then we need to talk about the economy aspect. And we can't hold up the economy part of it because we must ensure the environmental is perfect or the educational is perfect. And that's what people are asking us to do now. You know, don't move forward with development because the environment is not perfect. You know, I want a trail to go from from the beach, State Beach, all the way to BLM land and the monument, and for residents to use and for animals to use. But if it's supposed to be equal focus, then we need to build the economy also. So I just want to thank them for authoring this letter, and I know they had a little slant the other way, but I just wanted us to take notice of it. And so thank you, Chair.
Is that a prelude to your making a motion?
I think you got a hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Ralph.
Nice try.
Okay.
No, I just wanted to reiterate some of the things that have been said here. And I want everybody to understand something. I would have not brought up the prevailing wage issue because I had already received assurances that that wasn't an issue. But when I see a letter on the dais that was dated yesterday, you know, opening up that whole can of worms again, I just have to reiterate my stance and my passion for that issue. But you know, looking over the consistency determination, looking over the elements in the plan, looking over the road that we've been on as FORA and all the sovereign jurisdictions, we came together with the community and made a covenant, made a pact amongst ourselves that we would abide by these rules. And we did so by conforming our general plans to these rules. Now, things change, that's true, but you know what? We cast our plans in stone, so to speak, in compliance with the base reuse plan. And here we are today looking over the sovereign city of Marina's plan to move forward. And I'm all for it. I'm all for it. With all the assurances that we've received from the city of Marina and their representatives, and I trust them because they have proven to be good stewards. They've been proven to be good stewards, and I appreciate that. And I know that in the past they have helped us do what we need to do. And the only way it's all going to get done is if we continue to work together in the goal of recreating the economic engine that Fort Ord was and still needs to be. So I stand in support of this item. Thank you.
Is that a prelude?
That's a motion.
Yes. Okay, so we have a motion by Mayor Rubio and a second by Councilman Oglesby. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Yes, Eduardo. Okay, the motion is to approve resolution concerning concurring in the City of Marina's legislative land use decision development entitlement that the Marina General Plan text amendment, specific plan, zoning map amendment, and project entitlements related to the promontory are consistent with the Fort Ord base reuse plan. Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Board. Okay, next we have for old business, first the fiscal year 2013-14 capital improvement program. Michael, take it away.
Yes, Chair Edel and members of the board, there is a two-part item before you today. One is to receive a status report. The second is to adopt the FY 2013-14 CIP. The board members did receive communications in regard to this item. There was a letter that came from the Building Industry Association in regard to this. This item has been before the board since June, received a number of different discussions, including sending this back to the Administrative Committee to review certain items that were brought up at past board meetings. As of this meeting, The Administrative Committee is recommending adoption of this capital improvement program, and Steve Inslee will provide a report.
Members of the board, just to take you back to where we were the last time we were before this board, members of the Administrative Committee and others had asked you to allow them to go back to the 7/31 Administrative Committee meeting and to complete work on discussions relative to the remaining issues that had to be worked through. And on our next slide, I can show you just sort of an overview of what those issues were. There's been a fair amount of discussion just about how we cut back absorption assumptions that are submitted by the jurisdictions, and what we've done here is to just accept the jurisdictions' submittals for the 13-14 year, and so just wanted to make that clear that we have made the changes that were requested and that the Administrative Committee concurred in. There has been discussion about the cost indexing and what the appropriate index to use. We have used the same index for the last 12, 15 years or so since the Community Facilities District was put into place, and that index has already taken effect for this fiscal year because it is automatically indexed as of July 1. But what we did agree to do is to go back and take a look at some of the arguments and discussions about what index would be the appropriate one for next year's CIP process. So we will do that. Issues came up relative to transportation and transit expenditures, both project costs and the contingencies. And similarly, we agreed that when we get to the 14-15 CIP that we would take a look at those assumptions, which is something that we do every year, but I think what's being requested is that we do it in more detail for next year's CIP, and we're happy to do so. There were some questions relative to exactly what the Habitat Conservation Plan requires, what makes up the $39.5 million overall cost, and we just wanted to make it very clear that although it is a fairly arcane subject matter that is subject to the authority of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the California Fish and Wildlife Department, that the ACP endowment is fully funded by fiscal year 1920 now with acceptance of the land use jurisdiction forecast. So there were some questions that have been raised about that, and that has been worked to satisfaction. Specifically about contingencies, you might remember that during the EPS Phase 1 study, the contingencies were looked at in great detail, and they had originally been somewhere around $120 million. They were reduced to somewhere around $40 million. But we're also more than willing, and in fact think it's a very good idea, to continue to look at those contingencies in the 14-15 time frame when we get more information, in particular about the transportation contingencies and the HCP and what U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service ultimately decides. The final issues that have been worked through by the Administrative Committee had to do with water augmentation. There was some question about why those augmentations, or the additional amounts that FORA has been showing in its cash flows would be put at the very tail end of the life of FORA, and we agreed that it made more sense to spread it out over the 7-year life, and so we've done that. Then there was also some discussion about what's being referred to as surplus fund balances. What this means is that as you project out in essence, a $500 million program, you're going to end up at the end of the program, somewhere around 2024 and on, that with some kind of fund balance. You'd like it to end up positive $1, so that you used every dollar appropriately, and but it may be that we come out with more, and if so, and there are reasonable arguments to be made as to why, then it would make sense that we take another look at that and just talk about what kind of projection we're making. It's moved around a little bit because every time we make a change to the spreadsheets, of course, you're going to have a little bit of fluctuation. It's fluctuated between 4 million and 10 million, something to that effect. And so we'll, what our suggestion is that we keep a very close look at that number and add that into our discussions for the 2014-15 CIP. And then finally, the narrative in a number of areas of the report have been adjusted, edited, revised, based on comments that we've heard from board members, from administrative committee members, from the public, and from jurisdictional staff. So moving to the next steps, what we're proposing is that we bring back to this board a request for a phase 3 study and fee calculation, because we're going to have to do the rate setting for next year as required by your policy anyway. So it would have made sense to get some consulting power, go back and do that. And I would like to suggest that we fold in these issues that I've just gone through into the 14-15 FORA CIP reprogramming, so that we can essentially get a second opinion about what it is that we feel about this, and then bring it back to the administrative committee through the normal process, and then ultimately come back to this board May of 2014 for a what I call a no harm, no foul workshop type format, similar to what we did this year, and then ultimately for board approval in June. So that, in a nutshell, is the concept. Then in terms of the scope that we would include, just to reiterate, we would take a look at the remaining CIP obligations, in particular costs relative to transportation, transit, habitat, and then also in particular the contingencies. We would recommend adjustment to CIP obligations and costs based on that review. And we would also take a look at the construction cost index selected, so that the methodology is considered to be sound, and bring that back. And then reevaluate on the revenue side, land sales, property taxes, and other non-CFD funding sources, just so that we're able to model out both the revenue and the expenditure sides. And then finally, as I mentioned, the policy required second fee formula calculation. You went through that, the first one, a couple months ago, but the policy requires us 1 year later to come back with another analysis. And so we would bring that all back together at the same time, and you would have the best available information to make your decision. So with that, what is recommended tonight is to adopt the fiscal year 2013-14 capital improvement program, which is what would carry us through the rest of this fiscal year.
That concludes your briefing, Steve?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. A good briefing. Any questions by members of the board? Yes, Frank.
Yes, Steve, looking at the staff report, actually it's page 49 of 107 pages. It's the Title IV Community Facilities District Revenue.
Page number again?
Page 49.
Got it?
Yes, under existing replacement residential, you make reference, or it makes reference to Preston Park. Am I to conclude from this document that you consider Preston Park to be in the community facilities district?
Preston Park is under the, not the Community Facilities District per se, but it is under a base-wide developer fee program that was an overlay put across the entire base. And the developer fee for Preston Park itself, however, was negotiated separately, so it's actually included in the implementation agreements between FORA and Marina and called out in a particular manner.
Okay, to my right, I just heard the word no, and I don't really know who it
So
came
it's not,
from.
so it's not in the CFD per se, but it is required to pay a developer fee based on the overlay that preceded the Community Facilities District.
And the development fee is to be paid under certain conditions which are presently in dispute, to
Correct.
say the least. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions by board members? Bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You talked about accepting the jurisdiction forecast to determine the absorption rate. Do we see different numbers for FY 2013-14 as a consequence of that in this CIP?
Yeah, I can have Jonathan walk you through the numbers particularly, but it does adjust the numbers to some extent. So, if I could sort of give an overview to the board as to how we do this. The jurisdictions will submit to the administrative committee process their best projections as to what they think they're going to be going forward with in the fiscal year. And in some years, those projections have hit the nail on the head. In other years, they have been wildly enthusiastic. And so there has been some back and forth over the years where we would, as I used to call it, give those numbers a haircut. And so the haircut that we were using coming into this year was 50%, consistent with the Finance Committee's review for other aspects. And I think in the last board meeting, I went through that a little bit, that each of your different committees have different parts to play in this process. The Administrative Committee looks at it from one standpoint, Finance Committee from another. And what we did in this case is that the jurisdictions essentially are on the front line. They're able to tell us what projects are going forward by June 30 of 2014 that we're absolutely sure are going to happen. Now, being absolutely sure about what's going to happen in the economy obviously is more of an art than a science, but that is what took place, is a more further discussion, refining of those numbers, and we ultimately accepted those jurisdictional adjustments, and they were not huge for the 13-14 year. So it's not a tremendous swing. The end result, of course, of missing your projection, and I think I mentioned this last time also, is just that if you over-project the amount of dollars you're going to have and you don't get them, then some of your projects have to be carried over or modified in some manner. If you if you go the other direction, then you've missed it in that manner. So it's not something that is tragic in that sense, but what we've been arguing for is the best analysis that we can do as to how much we're actually going to bring in the coming fiscal year.
So may I
Yes,
ask
Bill,
a
follow
follow-up
up.
question, and that is, in going from some haircut to no haircut, what are the implications for the impact fees that would be paid on those projects that do move forward?
The basic impact, and it's in the material, is
It was hard to find.
if you expect to have more revenue, then you would have less need for a higher fee. So it's going to go back and forth a little bit in that sense.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say to the jurisdictions, with the greatest respect for the integrity of the forecast, and I have no doubt that everything is given in good faith, the question that lurks in my mind is, based on the track record of this, in terms of estimating on a macro basis, not challenging any specific element of that. Is it appropriate to assume that everything projected will actually happen? And that's the question that I was pursuing here. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Other questions by board members?
Mayor Edlin?
I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up to Mayor Camp's question. So Economic Planning Systems, our consultant, has forecasted that we'll do about 180 dwelling units per year going forward. What is the actual sum total of the haircut amount of dwelling units for all the land use jurisdictions that you used in this process?
Well, the haircut for this year was 50%. As we routinely dropped the estimates. It was a number that originally came out of a finance committee discussion, but
I'm looking for the actual number.
in terms of millions of dollars, or
No,
'cause
dwelling units. Dwelling units.
Yeah, we
I'm
don't
trying
give
to
it.
compare.
Yeah, we didn't give a haircut per se on that. We would move them out into later years, so the dollars come through, but it would adjust the current fiscal year.
Okay, I'm talking about this upcoming fiscal year for which you've gotten projections. I assume, maybe wrongly, that the land use jurisdiction said we're going to do X dwelling units in our part of Fort Ord, and a different land use jurisdiction said we're going to do Y. I just want to know what the sum of X plus Y plus Z is specifically going for this upcoming year.
What's just a good ballpark dollar number? We can look it up, I guess. Just
Talking dwelling units, not dollars.
okay.
Yeah, in the board packet, there is a table called, I believe it's Appendix B, Residential Table A1, and that shows the projected number of dwelling units in the forecast. I'll get the page number in just a moment. It's page number 55 of 107, and you'll see there at the page 2 of that table, on the back side, it totals the number of units per fiscal year. So you'll see in fiscal year 13-14, 273 units projected. The next fiscal year, 714. So it follows along, an approximate 700 to 1,000 units per year, and then back down to 400 some in 20/21 fiscal year.
Did you cut that 273 in half, or the 273 is exactly what you used?
So we used what the jurisdiction submitted as forecast. We did no haircut for this CIP.
Thank you.
Other questions by board members? Seeing none, let's go out to the public. Any members of the public wishing to address the board on this issue, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Back to the board then. Debbie, did you have a question or a comment?
I just had a general comment.
Please.
First of all, I want to say I appreciate the FORA staff and the admin committee, including funding for the Highway 68 improvements and Davis Road projects that we've been working with the County of Monterey on in the next fiscal year, because those are expenses that are coming up in that time frame, so we appreciate that. And second of all, I want to say it probably occurs to me because we're in the process of updating our countywide regional impact fee, which is actually quite a different animal than the FORA fee. The FORA fee is not, technically speaking, a mitigation impact fee. It's a Melrose fee that tries to kind of look like an impact fee. So the issue of contingencies doesn't come up so much in the impact fees, because you have to be very careful about that. And so my recommendation is, in the analysis that you're contemplating with the consultant, that the closer you get to an impact fee, the better this meets the requirements of CEQA and the impacts that are happening on the roads. And so if we can look at updating the costs, as you talked about, I think is really important. Not just the contingencies, but if there are any changes in impacts. For instance, one of the projects that, for whatever reason, didn't make it on the list when we did our reevaluation in 2005 was improvements at 12th Street and Highway 1. And that probably had to do with the fact that Imgen Parkway had just opened and the numbers weren't quite there. And so if some impact analysis can be looked at as well, essentially that's the cost side of the contingencies versus the the benefit side of the contingencies, I think that would be helpful. And the other thing is, in our fee update, we don't look at the absorption rates provided by the cities. We use the AMBAG projections. Now, those are a little longer term, but there might be some synergy in looking at the AMBAG projections. They take a little longer viewpoint, and that may get more of a long-term realistic economic analysis. So I look forward to working with your staff in this update process. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Any other board discussion? Okay, Supervisor Potter is the motion maker, and Mayor Rubio is the second.
I'd just like to speak to it briefly, if I might, Mr. Chair.
Please.
I want to say that, and I know the board was anxious to approve this a while ago, but I think the work that was done at the admin level was very, very valuable. If it isn't ripe for decision and controversy still remains, I think it's best that we take that extra bit of time so we can end up in a position like we are today. And I would say the same thing for the Promontory project. Same issue. Much concern, certain concerns about, where were the housing units being allocated, where was the water coming from, went back to admin, they worked it over, they came to agreement, and I think that's a process we should acknowledge. A lot of hard work goes in there, there's a lot of controversy, a lot of contrary points of view, but that's great. If they can work it out and we can have a level of comfort with what goes on, and if we don't agree, we won't agree, but that's the nature of the beast. But I do appreciate the level of effort that went into this, because I do think the CIP is the critical element to the completion of the base reuse plan.
And to piggyback on that, the admin committee, they were very busy individuals, and they met specifically this week so they could tie together the recommendation to the full board. Spent a lot of time and a lot of work there. So again, they thank you very much. Any other discussion on this item? I'm sorry. Yes, we were the public. Yes, we did. Okay. Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We didn't go to the public. We did go to the public. I thought I was losing my mind here. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Anybody opposed?
No.
Okay. We have one nay. Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Next is we have under old business, authorize executive officer to execute the CCCVC land transfer agreement. Michael?
Yes, Chair Edelin, members of the board, this is the last step in the process that we will need to take to formally enter into an agreement with the state of California for the transfer of property that will enable the California Central Coast Veterans Cemetery. There is a lot of work going on with the California Central Coast Veterans Cemetery in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. these weeks. And next week is the application deadline. There needs to be some certification by the Department of Finance. There's other work that needs to be accomplished over the course of the next month or two. But this is the last part of what FORA will need to do to make sure that the state will be in position to do the CEQA work that will allow for the transfer to occur next year. Chair, I ask the board's indulgence and approval.
Great work, Michael. Any questions by members of the board? Saying none out to the public. Any questions by member of the public? Saying none, bring it back to the board. Entertain a motion, please. Okay, the Mayor Rubio is the motion maker, and who was the second? Mayor Gunter. Okay. Any discussions on the motion? Okay, saying none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. That's the culmination of an awful lot of hard work. Okay, next we have the public comment period. Any member of the public can address the board on any item not on the agenda. You've got 3 minutes. Please.
Good afternoon, Ron Cheshire. In spite of the fact that Councilman O'Connell is a Red Sox fan and I'm a Yankee fan, they're about 11 and a half games ahead of us. I trust you, Frank.
I love the way the Yankees play.
You know, sooner rather than later, you are going to get a little educational presentation in regards to prevailing wages, and I know all of you will just be thrilled to death. It is a sensitive subject. The general prevailing wage determination is one thing and the residential prevailing wage determination is another. Now I'm going to tell you the big difference. Only 2 trades have a residential rate in Monterey County as determined by the state of California. One is the Carpenters Union, and it's about a 60-cent difference. The other one is the sprinkler fitters. Now that's a little more significant. Theirs runs into the dollars, maybe as much as $8 or $9. No other trade has any variance between the general or residential prevailing wage rate. What's annoying is watching you unanimously vote in regards to a subject and then having somebody come up in my face and say, we're only going to pay what South County or East Garrison's paying. If South County or East Garrison are paying anything other than what they're supposed to, we will bring it to FORA this time instead of to the court and see if FORA does anything with it. If you don't do anything with it, we'll take it to the courts. There's already been a ruling. We don't know why we have to continue to fight this. But I think it's probably just the good old-fashioned greed factor. You know, I've got twin boys, and developers are just like twin boys. They'll get away with whatever they can get away with, as long as you let them. So, I'm happy
30
that
seconds.
you've made a decision, but again, I don't understand why someone would provoke me after in regards to this whole situation.
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Now, the state of California can come in, make a determination if somebody asks for it, but I guarantee you, with the way things are in Sacramento at this time, it's got a snowball's chance. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll be having the presentation next month. I understand we have a guest speaker who might be wearing a chef's hat during that period of time. Okay. The next speaker, please.
Margaret Davis. The new buzzword at FORA is sovereign. Jurisdictions including Seaside and Marina, for example, are now reputedly sovereign. All you other board members should back off of objecting to anything the landowner cities might want because it's an insult to their sovereignty, and besides, you have no skin in the game. I can understand why a jurisdiction would claim sovereignty if it means I won't thwart your will or inconsistencies of the BRP if you don't question mine. But why are the rest of you going along with this? If these jurisdictions are sovereign, why are you here? Why was FORA renewed? The reuse of Fort Ord affects everyone. We're all on this peninsula together. How sovereign is any city? You're all embrangled with LAFCO and AMBAG, Water District, School District, County, State, Air Quality Board, MST, TAMC, on and on. Sovereign is a grand and archaic word applying to absolute monarchs in big wigs and high heels. When it comes to FORA, the cities have discretion, not sovereignty. It's a betrayal of the public trust who expect FORA to function as a watchdog if everyone accepts these claims of sovereignty we keep hearing, and no one offers a demurral of any kind, not the chairman, not Mr. Hulamard, not the lawyer. I suggest that rather than the watchword and the canard being skin in the game, that a more appropriate slogan would be feet to the fire.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker, please. Any other members of the public wishing to address the board? Okay, I did notice that Assemblymember Stone came in. Sir, would you like to say anything to the board?
Not in particular. Thank
Okay.
you. Glad to be here.
Your presence is, we're honored. Okay, this public comment period is now closed. Next, we have Executive Officer's Report. Michael?
Yes, Chair Elam, there would be 2 action items under Executive Officer's Report. I'd like to take items A and E first. Under item A, under outstanding receivables, staff and council have presented an agreement between the City of Delray Oaks and the Fort Ord Reuse Authority regarding a methodology for dealing with the outstanding receivable that's included and described therein, and staff would request that the board take action to approve the executive officers, to allow the executive officer to execute that memorandum of agreement between FORA and the City of Delray Oaks. Item, yes, Chair. Item 10E is it travel report. The Fort Ord Reuse Authority in past years has authorized the travel expenses for members of our administrative committee who are seeking to attend the Association of Defense Communities conferences. This particular conference this fall that'll be in Portland, Maine, is one that discusses exclusively base closure activities, redevelopment and reuse activities, particularly as it pertains to economic and educational reuse on former installations where there are environmental issues and concerns. And so City Manager Daniel Dawson, who's the chair of the administrative committee, has requested that the board make an exception to the current travel policy to allow travel expenses for Dan Dawson to be reimbursed.
Yeah, FORA might be analogy akin to a sausage-making factory, and the admin committee tends to be the organization that takes the meat and grinds it up. That's the part you really don't want to see, and they can have some really grinding episodes in the admin committee. It's a FORA board where we have our white smocks on, and we sort of represent ourselves in front of the public with what the admin committee's done. So personally, and I think the admin committee agrees, the executive committee agrees with me, it's important that we have the chair of the admin committee there at some of these important conferences and briefings so that he can get the full knowledge base that he can bring back and use it in his position. So just my 2 cents. Discussion by members of the board? Questions? Out to the public, any questions or from members of the public on either item? Okay, back to the
Chair,
board.
I
Go.
move that we authorize payment of all estimated expenses for Daniel Dawson.
Okay.
And which is a change from written, which says allowed, which would be ambiguous. So
Okay.
I think it's important that it be estimated expenses.
We'll make that charge. So that how about the memorandum of agreement?
I'm sorry. I move that we approve the memorandum of agreement.
Okay, so we have a motion on the motion and a second, and the travel authorization. Okay, and it 3 items and the travel authorization.
One is the memorandum of understanding. The second is approving the travel authorization. The third is an exception to policy.
I move we authorize the exception to policy.
Okay. Mayor Camp was the motion maker, Supervisor Potter the second. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Michael, any more of your report?
The rest is information, Chair. I have nothing more to add.
Okay, any items from the members? Any items? If not, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. A little over 2 hours. Not bad. Let's make this a habit.